Hello and welcome to the Happier Life Project, brought to you by the free, award-winning mental health and wellness app, My Possible Self. I'm your host, Gabby Sanderson, and today we're going deep into a topic that affects so many new parents, but often remains unspoken: maternal mental health. The first few weeks and months after having a baby can be an emotional whirlwind, from overwhelming deep love and joy to worry, sadness and frustration. It's completely normal to experience a roller coaster of feelings. But for some, those low moments can linger and intensify. Postnatal depression, or PND, can develop within the first year of giving birth, often appearing in those early months. It's a challenging experience, and it's one that today's guest, Chlo Hodgkinson, knows firsthand. Chlo is a personal trainer and women's coach who specialises in working with hormones and the menstrual cycle. After recovering from her own journey with disordered eating and relative energy deficiency, Chlo became passionate about helping other women break free from diet culture, restore their hormone health, and reconnect with their bodies. She's also the founder of Chlo & Co Media, a social media company dedicated to the fitness and wellness space. Plus, Chlo runs the My Possible Self social channels. You might have seen her lovely face popping up on our Instagram. And she's been on this podcast twice before, last week interviewing me about my journey freezing my eggs, and previously discussing her favourite subject, hormone health, and sharing her own deeply personal story when she struggled with disordered eating, losing her period, and then working tirelessly towards the joyful moment when she fell pregnant. In this episode, we pick up with Chlo opening up about her pregnancy journey, how she set herself up for a smooth labour, and then the emotional toll that followed. Chlo shares her experience with postnatal depression at the 4 to 5 month mark, how she managed to pull herself out of it, and the role that mum guilt played throughout her journey. We also discuss the pressure to bounce back after giving birth to that pre-pregnancy body, how Chlo protected herself from the overwhelming social media content out there and unsolicited advice on parenting, and how she balances her career with the demands of motherhood. Whether you're a new parent, planning for a family, or simply want to understand more about maternal mental health, this conversation is a powerful reminder that you're not alone and support is available. And if you're listening to this episode during the week of its release, you'll know that we are gearing up to celebrate all the mothers out there, as this Sunday is Mother's Day in the UK. So, ready to find a healthier, happier you? Let's get started. Quick recap. Obviously, you were the fantastic interviewer last week on the podcast where I talked about my mental health journey with fertility and specifically with freezing my eggs. Before that, you came on the pod and talked about, well, we called the episode title Hormone Hacks and Working with Your Menstrual Cycle. And there's been some quite large lifestyle changes since that episode went out. So this is your third appearance on the podcast. Welcome back.
Thanks. What a privilege.
But yeah, so when you came on the podcast the first time and you were talking about your journey with disordered eating and body image and how that had affected your hormones and how you ended up without having a period for, was it 2 years?
2 years I knew of. I was on the pill before that, so who knows?
Yeah. And just kind of like your journey throughout all that and how it led you to help other women, I suppose, in this kind of position as well, with a very happy reveal at the end that you were pregnant.
Yeah.
Since then,
Hey, he's one next week.
Whoa, it's been that
So
long.
so by the time the podcast comes out, he would be one. I know.
Wow. Oh my God, where does the time fly? Well, no better lady then to talk to about mental health when it comes to, I guess we can say as an overarching theme, maternal mental health. Before we get into like the new mum business, I actually would like to ask you about your mental health whilst pregnant, but actually we can go back even before that to you didn't always want kids. So was this like a kind of happy surprise, or was there a pivot that made you change your mind?
So I remember, I'll take us right back to when I was like a teenager.
Okay.
And I was with a guy, no shade, but I definitely didn't want kids then.
Okay.
Looking back, that was probably because I was with him.
Okay, fair.
Okay. So I was like I wouldn't say I was anti it. It just wasn't really in my world or in my mind. I assumed for a lot of it that, there was like this sort of running joke that I would be like the rich aunt instead. But I was like open to it. I guess I was never like anti kids, but it just didn't really fit into my life as such.
Mm.
And then I met Tom, my now partner, and so I wasn't on the pill. And I remember getting to a point where I was like, if it happened, I don't feel a certain way. Like if it happened, I feel okay about it.
Okay.
But I think because I'd had so many up and downs with my period and I didn't really know, like my period was really irregular still. So who knows? I just assumed I would have a lot of problems. So we just stopped being careful.
Right.
But we had the conversation of like, yeah, I mean, Tom was ready to be a dad from like literally day one that I met him, bless him. He's made to be a dad. So he was absolutely fine with it. I think it was more me that was like, rah. But we had both said, look, if it did happen, like we would be open to it. And then weirdly, I went to Glastonbury. And I remember saying, my friend was like, oh, would you come back? And similar to what you said about on your episode of the pod, where you said like it just feels like a deep knowing.
Mm-hmm.
I just said, I'm all right if this is my last blowout.
Oh.
And then we think we conceived on the Monday after Glastonbury.
Ah, wow. I love the Glastonbury references because I had one last week as well, didn't I?
Of course you did. There's someone in the Glastonbury air, I'm telling you. I mean, poor Frankie, his cells are probably made up of pure alcohol.
Yeah, I like guitars.
Yeah. And it explains. So he does it every time he's excited or like his music or whatever. He like puts his arms like out and he's like jumps up and down. So he's like, oh, 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 oh. And we're like, that's the Glastonbury in him.
It's the festival. Yeah, festival baby. I love it. So then from when you had that conversation and you decided to come off the pill and just see what would happen and leave it kind of to fate, I guess, how long did it take you to conceive? Like, what was the timeline?
I couldn't tell you because I hadn't been on the pill for as long as I'd known Tom. So I'd say that we had stopped maybe being really careful. It was so like loose. And actually, it's quite interesting because I feel a lot of guilt around it. Or sometimes I feel guilt around it that because we were so not trying, that it didn't feel like a lot on me. Like I wasn't noticing it month on month.
Right.
But if I really had to put a time on it, I would probably say like maybe February, March time. And then I conceived would have been in the June. When's Glastonbury? Yeah, June, July time.
So we're only talking a few months then. We're not talking like
yeah, but and I do remember weirdly felt like I made space for it in my life. If that makes sense. I remember thinking like walking back from town one day and thinking like imagine if I was pregnant right now. Like I was, you touched on visualization and stuff like that. And I think I was just I also think what helped is I was so chill about it. And I'm not saying that, anyone that's going through fertility struggles or trying for a baby and things like that, that the answer is just be chill about it. But I think for me, there's someone that was lost their period from under eating and having a lot of cortisol in their body, actually just not stressing about it probably helped me a lot.
Yeah. How did you feel then when you found out?
I mean, I thought I had COVID originally, because I was in a workout and my heart rate was just going boom, boom, and I was like, "God, I think I'm coming down with something." And then my best friend was in labour at the time, and I thought, I'm just going to do a test, and it was like the faintest positive. And I just messaged her like, "I know you're a bit busy right now, but what do you think about this?" And she was like, "Oh my God," and like sent me a list of like, she like sent me to St. She was like, "Go to Sainsbury's now." I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll go later." "No, go now." She was like, "Get this test, this." I basically had like a list of different tests to get, like an electric one, an early one, and an early electric
Wow.
one. I don't know. And then, yeah, that pretty much confirmed. I was early. I was like 2 weeks.
Wow.
And then I think I had a bit of anxiety. Was it anxiety, or I think I was quite detached for quite a while because I'd had my fertility problems or like my period problems. So I told Tom, he was over the moon, but I was very much like, no, stay calm. Like, I don't think I allowed myself to attach to it, the pregnancy, if you like. I didn't, and I think I would associate the pregnancy with an it until, yeah, maybe that 12-week scan. And we had an early scan in that moment and we saw the heartbeat. So it was all confirmed. But I still, to me, it was a pregnancy, not a baby.
That's really interesting. I think there's that fear. I mean, you just hear statistically, don't you, a lot that obviously like miscarriage, like I think I would feel very similarly to you that it's like until you get that 12-week okay, that
Yeah.
it's like, you know, something could, thank God it didn't, but it does happen so often.
Yeah. And I think I was more in my head about logistics. So I was like, okay, I'm self-employed. Okay, I've built my career up. I have built my business up. I own a social media agency and then I also run my Instagram. Like, I have built this up and I've worked so hard for this. Now that's all gone, is it? And I think I was so caught up in logistics, like what happens when, okay, now Tom's working. When am I going to be able to work? Do I make that decision to work? How am I going to still be able to train? Because for me, I was surrounded by so much knowledge of, that's it. Now you're pregnant and you've had a baby. You will say goodbye to your body, say goodbye to your career, and say goodbye to feeling good and to any time.
Yeah.
So I was a lot in my head about that. Is I was like, oh my God, hang on a second, but everything I've built, that's it. That's all just disappearing now. And I really struggled to come to terms with that. Luckily for me, Tom is very open-minded and really brilliant talker. So I was able to share all of this and we were able to figure it out. So he was like, look, if you don't want to take, like, if I completely understand, well, he works shifts, he's a train driver. So we were able, and this is what we do now. So like if he's today, yeah, he starts work at 2 p.m. I work in the mornings, he goes to work. So like we had to have those really difficult conversations. But I would say early pregnancy, I didn't let myself, do you know what? I'm not sure I even let myself get attached that whole pregnancy. I don't think I had obviously it was amazing when I felt him move, but I don't think I felt that big the way other parents do. And I think that's because a lot of the time I was in my head about logistics and I had to do a lot of like hypnotherapy, meditation, surrounding myself with positive birth stories, and also like working mums and like mumpreneurs. What do they call it? Mumtrepreneurs. Do you know what I mean? I had to like block out all of that outsideness and just like really consume all of the content I needed to try to tell myself, look, life doesn't end now you've had a baby.
I wonder if part of that as well was maybe a little bit of self-preservation or self-protection, you know, because of your journey before you got pregnant.
Absolutely. I remember telling myself, it's okay if this doesn't work out. This is just part of your story. Like in my head, it's like I'd already created content based off that.
Wow.
Do you know? And I think that was all just to protect myself. Yeah. Okay, if this doesn't work out, I will go to Thailand and do a retreat. Like it's like I was do you know what I mean? I was constantly trying to like find, like, and I think it is just a run away from those thoughts, right? Trying to protect myself around it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so then as the pregnancy continued, how was your emotional health and your mental health then? You know, you being the hormone expert.
I have to say, and I think I touched on it. I feel a lot of guilt. I really struggled with the guilt because I actually had a really easy ride. You know, I would hear stories from friends about like really bad pregnancy symptoms. I had nausea for like 2 weeks. That's pretty much it. I had like I loved egg mayo sandwiches, but like it wasn't like a instant craving. My diet pretty much stayed the same. I did CrossFit all the way through my pregnancy.
Wow.
I didn't struggle with sleep. I obviously got a bump, and I think I'm not even sure I had huge body hang-ups because in my head I justified it because I was pregnant. So what do you expect?
Mm.
So I actually had quite an easy ride in terms of pregnancy symptoms. But I think the thing that I struggled with was, that I said earlier, is just that like logistic side of things.
Right.
Like, how can I reach my goals in life and be a mum?
Mm.
And then I would feel waves of guilt that I was like, why are you even thinking like that? You should just appreciate the fact that you get to be a mum. And those feelings followed me through early postpartum as well.
Ooh, okay. Well, I will say this, Chloe, just about having like you said, an easy ride. I think maybe that was just a bit of karma because you did so much good work before getting pregnant, you know, and like people that haven't listened to that episode, you really do share your story, the hormone hacks and working with your menstrual cycle. I want to go back and listen. But I think it's like, you know, from where you started to where you ended, you did the work, you know, you really
Yeah.
like healed your body. And I think this is kind of testament to how much work you did.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it as well at the end of your podcast about like understanding your body and like, you know, de-stressing with you. And I think that 100% is the case. That I knew how my body was working. I was so in tune with it. And I think that's how I knew I was pregnant so early on as well. Like I knew straight away something was different. But I couldn't put my finger on it. It was either illness or, yeah, I'd seen a couple of like early pregnancy like symptoms, which was like rapid heart rate. But yeah, and I think you're right. I think sometimes when you're so in tune with your body, it can be a bit annoying because you're like, like I'm quite sensitive or whatever. But actually, yeah, I think I was able to listen to my body on like real micro levels of being like, right, this is what I need. And I noticed that, you know, at times that I was craving burger and chips, probably I just needed to eat a bit more. Do you know what I mean? So like actually the burger and chips was because my body was craving more energy. So I would just make sure I was eating even more. And then suddenly the cravings disappear. I'm not saying that's the case for everyone. It's just like, for me, I was able to be like, right, what does my body want? Burger and chips? Great. If it does, I made me and Tom go on like a massive hunt. I wanted pub fish and chips, but like it had to be, I was like, but it can't be crap pub fish and chips.
Yeah,
so
yeah, it's got to be the real.
Yeah, and we had to like we went on a bit of a gallivant because that's like all I could think about. And so I definitely warranted, but I also tried to look at it from like a micro level as well, of like, okay, well, if the body is craving this kind of food, what is it actually after? A lot of the time, I probably just needed to eat more every single day, like just increase my overall energy availability, and then I wouldn't have such crazy cravings.
Yeah. Can I ask you quickly then about the birth itself? Like, was it traumatic?
So I'm touching on about like whether I was accepting I was pregnant or not. I gave myself, so I was due in the March, and I said to myself, I will start working on labour and accepting I'm pregnant from January. So then January hit, and I was like, okay, I told myself now I would start bracing myself for labour. And I did positive birth hypnotherapies, read all about hypnobirthing. And so that's when I just followed like natural births, read up so much information about like, you know, labour isn't meant to be painful.
Really?
Yeah, it's not. Your body knows what to do. Your body will literally give birth. It's meant to do this, right? Like we're not.
I wonder how many people listening are screaming into their headsets right now going, what?
Right? Literally. But if you read, so like there's a book called The Positive Birth Company, and then there's, I think it's like Badass Midwife or something on Instagram that talks about basically, like, I was consuming all of these positive birth stories and watching these labors on Instagram to fill my subconscious with like, this doesn't have to be an awful experience, because I think you can be so consumed. And now when I talk to friends about it, they were like, oh, I wish I knew I didn't have to be induced. So there were so many things about, like, you know, they'll encourage cesareans or induction, whereas like, actually I learned all about my rights. Like, I can say no to things. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. And I think that meant that I was really empowered and also really calm. So when I went into, I chose to have a sweep. And then
A sweep?
Yeah. So you can, it's not an induction, but I was due on the Thursday and I went in on the Monday, and you can have this sweep, which I think basically like just sort of like pulls the lining away from, I might be butchering this, but you pull the lining away from the baby or something that basically like can initiate labor, but it's not an actual induction. It's just like a, hello, if you want to come, you can come. And I chose to have, my midwife checked me and she was like, your cervix is really ripe, like it's good. Do you want me to sweep while I'm up here? I love my midwife. She was brilliant. Again, I think it helps with having a good midwife, right? Like, really empowered me. And I was like, yeah, while you're up there, give it a go. As soon as I left, me and Tom were going to walk into town to have some lunch. I was like, I can't go to town. And then I gave birth on the Wednesday. But again, it was I was able to like breathe through it. I didn't have any pain relief. I had a water birth. I had like a couple of conspiracy theories where like I felt like Tom and the midwife, where I'd said don't offer me pain relief, they weren't going to offer me pain relief. So I was like, well, I'm not going to even ask for it then. So I think this is like sometimes my mindset that I'm like tapped into. I was like, wow, if you're not going to offer it to me, I'm not going to ask for it.
Did you need it, or it really wasn't that uncomfortable?
Oh, no. Please do not get me wrong. It is not a nice experience.
Okay.
Like, it is painful. And when they talk about the ring of fire, when the head crowns, my best friend who was with me when I found out, like over text, she said, when that ring of fire, that's the worst bit, because it sometimes like crowns and then comes back in, crowns, come back again. She was like, you might feel the ring of fire multiple times. I felt it once and I thought, I'm not going to I thought, bugger that. I'm not feeling that again. So that's when I push. I think because I was so educated on it and had surrounded myself by so many positive birth stories. Plus, I think like Tom was brilliant. I think like, you know, it might be, I had such a good support network. My midwife was brilliant. My friends had all been through it recently. Like, I wasn't on my own. And I think, you know, they say it takes a village, don't they, to raise a kid. And I think it's that throughout the pregnancy as well. Like, I was so empowered. I was so educated. I had such a good support network. I knew I was going to be supported by Tom. Tom and I had difficult conversations when I was pregnant about like how we were going to juggle this, what I would need from him, that sort of thing, that I think helped my whole process, I think.
So then you go through it, you have your beautiful baby. You've had all these conversations with Tom beforehand, but then there's a whole new reality when there's the third person that's, I think from the get-go, got their own like wants and needs and schedule to some extent. And then as they get older, personality. So did the plan have to be tweaked?
I'd heard about postpartum depression. I'd heard about that sort of stuff doesn't happen to me. And I think how old was he? So I was breastfeeding, and then I stopped breastfeeding at 6 months, and it was around the sort of 4 month sleep regression into 5 months. So he was born in the March, and I would say August. I've never experienced a moment like that. And suddenly my whole world shifted, in that I felt like I actually felt more guilt, in the sense that I felt like I've been so ignorant to anyone that really suffered from depression and anxiety. I felt like I finally knew how that felt. The way I describe it is knowing that your life is amazing. So knowing you've got this beautiful baby, I still managed to keep my career. I was still had a really well functioning business. I had an amazing partner who was so hands-on with Frankie. My family were all around me. We just moved into a new house. Like I had so much to be grateful for. Yet I would go for a walk, and I would remember being on the phone to my mum and saying, "Mum, my life is so good. Yet why do I feel like I've got this deep, dark hole in my stomach?"
Okay.
Like I was scared to go to sleep because I didn't want to wake up and still feel the same as I did that day. And I couldn't put my finger on it.
Okay. I mean, did somebody, if you couldn't put your finger on it, did somebody close to you put the finger on it? Because, new mum to go through that kind of change, I'd imagine people noticed that you were different.
Yeah, I think my mum was brilliant. She would phone me regularly. I'm sure she spoke to a lot of people around me to say that she was worried about me. So I did have people check in on me and things like that. But I did feel like it was one of those things that I sort of had to sort out myself, in a sense. Is I was like, right, I needed that support, but I needed that to be like, right, hang on a second, right, let me take it back to basics. And this is where, going back to all of that work I did to help recover my hormones, to get my period back, I took it back to then. Is I was like, right, I know I'm going through some sort of hormonal change. The whole, who the hell am I after you've had a baby? Suddenly I don't care about things that I've cared about before. Suddenly I feel more angry about certain things. I hate that person. I don't want to do that. Like, the emotions felt really high. And I thought, okay, where so much of my life is out of my control, which is really hard for a type A personality control freak like me anyway. Okay, what can I do to help take me back to basics?
What did help?
I woke up and I did a walk-in meditation every day. I started journaling a bit more. I woke up with that whole like a gorilla pats his chest. It, like, to me, I was like, tap my head, and I was just like, right, come on, Chloe, you can do this. And I would like get dressed in the morning, put a proper outfit on, meditate, try and like get outside, the newborn stage. You're so consumed by so much, like, life is so different, yet there's also so much quietness. And like, for someone that's always been so busy running a career and suddenly, like, going to London, I'm not doing that anymore. Like, the quietness felt quite overwhelming. I'd say meditation and intention setting, visualization, it really helped. Getting up, getting out, getting dressed, all of that really helped.
So you didn't go to a doctor and get prescribed anything?
Oh, Gabby, I didn't feel like I was sick enough.
Oh.
I knew I was low, but I was like, no, I'm not that low.
On reflection, do you think you were sick enough?
I think it's easier now I'm out of it to be like, no, no, no. But I think at the time, if people knew what really was going on in my head, because I don't think I shared it all, I think people would be like, okay, Chloe. But then on the flip side, I started working with she's incredible. She's called Meg Charland. She's a hypnotherapist and business coach. And I started working with her in January, and everyone was so supportive of that. Maybe everyone was sort of like tiptoeing around me a little bit. They didn't want to suggest anything. They didn't want to.
Okay. Yeah.
Say the wrong thing, maybe.
Well, what about like, as well, having a newborn, what about the sleep factor? Because that's obviously, we know, such an important part of good mental health is good quality sleep.
Right. And I think like there's so many things with having a baby. So like the lack of sleep, the life change, the hormones, there's so much that goes on in your life. Yet I feel like the world is set up for us to be like, cool, you've got a baby, crack on, you're made to be a mum.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you've got to remember, like, no one taught us this. Like, suddenly I'm changing nappies and I'm breastfeeding. Like, no one's taught any of you like all of this. And like, life's so different to how it used to be way back, where you're brought up as a young girl to prep the house to become a mum. Like, whereas like now, the best of us, Gabby, like, we're empowered to create a career for ourselves and things like that. So I around it, I don't think. My mum's like a big career, like really career driven. I was really inspired by her as a kid. So like, I think there's so many things that are going on inside the female body after you've had a baby, but also the world around you is just like, oh, crack on. And you know, when you have a newborn, everyone's like, oh, what do you need, blah blah blah, and it's so amazing. But I'd actually say, if you have got any friends that are due to have a baby, check in at the 4-month part, because that's when no one else does.
I suppose in a way it's like the novelties wore off a little bit because you've had all the cuddles with the baby, and then it's like you said, life just cracks on, and then the mum's left like, guys.
Yeah. And partner might go back to work, you know, like so much happens. And I think as well for me is, so I gave birth on the 20th of March and we moved out of our house on the 1st of April. Yeah, we moved into my mum's for like 6 weeks maybe, and then we moved into our new house. My Tom was on a blooming stag do the weekend we got the keys, so me and my family moved us into house. So I had like a lot going on anyway, which I don't think necessarily helped. Like, he is the best, and he is, as he gets older, he gets even better for me, because you get a lot more back. I struggled with the newborn, that you're like just sort of like changing nappies and feeding, they can't even smile at you. But I think, like, for me, motherhood is incredible, but I wish I fully embraced it a little bit more. I wish I embraced the pregnancy more. I wish I embraced the newborn stage more. Whereas I think I came into everything like sort of trying to prove other people, like, nah, I'm not going to have symptoms. Nah, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to continue working. I'm going to continue exercise. And it's like, what for? Who was I doing that for?
Well, I can't help but wonder, Chlo, with your specific career, on one side, you've got this background in PT and the body. And then on the other side, you've like built up this social media empire where you're like the head honcho. And I'm thinking like two things. There's the whole like post-pregnancy body. Like, did you feel the pressure to, air quote, bounce back? And then also in terms of running social media and the content that is just consistently being thrown at you and the different messages and whatever, like then having, well, just being a new mum, like protecting yourself, I suppose, in like what you did let sink in. So I guess there's two questions there. So if we take the body thing first, having struggled in the past and then also being a PT, and I know you love your CrossFit and you're extremely passionate about that. I'm kind of guessing with you, Chlo, because you're so fit that you probably did bounce back. But like, did you feel any sort of pressure, or did you feel uncomfortable in your body because it felt different?
I was breastfeeding and I fell into the camp of literally just dropping loads of weight. I don't know as well if you listen to my, like, the previous episode that I was on, obviously I suffer from disordered eating, didn't I? Yeah. And I couldn't tell you whether I was intentionally restricting or what, like that whole sort of, if you had asked me at that point, there was no way, me and Tom have something called pudding, which is chocolate after we've had pudding. Like, in my head, I wouldn't have told you that I was actively restricting, but I'm also very aware that in times where I'm low, I naturally would avoid eating. Then, you know how some people sort of maybe lean into comfort food and other people. So I actually lost a lot of weight very, very quickly. And I actually haven't gained that back. I'm probably one of the smallest I've ever been, but I've like, where I've gone back to training, I've like built muscle around it. So I'm not just skinny, if that makes sense. But I think my body probably could do with gaining a little bit more fat. I also wonder whether that played such a huge role in how I felt around August, September time, where I naturally found it, is it even natural? I was unintentionally, like, clearly under eating, clearly because I was losing loads of weight, but I wasn't thinking about it because my whole life was consumed by a baby and still running my business as well, but also obviously just staying alive. That I wasn't like constantly thinking about it. So I don't think do you know the one thing I actually struggle with is where I lost weight, people thought I had a problem again. So like one person said to me, like, I'd asked a question and I was like, I don't really want to train like to lose weight. I'm not trying to do that. And they were like, oh, that's good because I was going to speak to you because I was worried about you. And I was like, bloody hell, if only I had the time to and the headspace to actively think that I couldn't eat a food anymore. Like in my head, I just didn't think about it. I didn't have the time to. So I wouldn't say that I actively bounced back, if that makes sense. I didn't intentionally bounce back, but I think for a lot of people on the outside looking in, I think they could see that I would maybe fit into that bounce back camp. Whereas I would argue, hey, was that done in the healthiest way? Absolutely not. If I had someone that came, so I'm pre and postnatal qualified for PT as well. If I had someone come to me that was breastfeeding and wanted to train, I would be on it with their food. And I think when I was in that headspace, I just wasn't on it with my food.
It's really interesting.
So I would actually say when it comes to like body as well, is I felt more pressure I felt guilty for being slim.
Really?
Yeah, I think I feel like guilt is one thing that really
I'm hearing
has followed me. Yeah. You feel like you're privileged to do that, which obviously I don't want to be suffering. I would rather have the pregnancy that I had. I'd rather have the easier fertility journey. I'd rather, not have had then the struggles with my weight. But I found myself like being like, oh yeah, but I am really skinny and I am trying to gain weight, like justify things. And I think that also is quite a key thing, right? Is that people are very quick to be like, don't go on the bounce back. But what if the bounce back, in quotation marks, wasn't intentional and you're telling someone that they look amazing and blah, 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 but actually they're not in a great headspace. So actually and I think we hear that conversation, don't we, about when people say, people are very quick to glorify the skinny, but what if your skinny friend actually feels really insecure about that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think as well, it's across to bear for anybody that's had any kind of disordered eating, or suffered from an eating disorder, that like people feel that they can comment on your weight and what you are or aren't eating. I think that happens a lot. And it could be argued that it's because they're concerned, but also on the flip side, to somebody who's air quote normal, you don't start commenting on what they are or aren't eating, It's
such a difficult, sticky topic, isn't it? But then I think there's also an element where you end up scared of saying anything, right? It's so tricky. And I don't want, this conversation, I don't want anyone to think that it's taken me a while to get to this point where now I'm stepping into mama bear, if you like, and it's taken therapy for me to embrace that mum life and being like, nah, it's cool to be a mum. Like, he's mine and he's like my little mate, and this is going to be a cool journey. And I'm still on that journey of accepting for it. Did I think that I was going to have to go on a journey to accept it? Absolutely not. But that is the route that's happened. And I don't want anyone listening to this to be like, oh, she should just be grateful. I'm not ungrateful for this. I wish I could have had a slightly different journey, in the sense like, I did feel guilty that I was struggling so much. I did feel guilty that I actually had a good pregnancy and a good labor. I felt guilty that I was struggling because I had such a community around me, but that doesn't mean that I don't love it at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think you're completely justified to have more than one feeling on it. I mean, it's you, isn't it? It's your personal journey, your story, your kid. Just going back to the social media thing real quick, being so deeply involved in social media, how did you manage the pressure of like the perfect mum ideal? Because, the algorithm just, whatever you're looking at, I'm sure it feeds you more of. I mean, for me, we didn't actually get around to talking about it on the whole with my fertility journey, but like, because I on Instagram follow some people that help with fertility holistically, then suddenly I was getting all sorts of like messages and promos and all, literally still get bombarded. So, like I said, being so...
It's a minefield.
There you go.
Isn't it? Yeah, you have to really protect yourself, because one video tells me do baby-led weaning. The next video shows me a baby choking. Then the next video tells me don't serve anything in plastic. Then the next thing is like, hey, look at these plastic bottles, this and this and this. I just think you have to go with your instinct. I think there is so much power in intuition and mother's instinct, and asking your community in your safe space. And I think it's the same with fitness journeys, with wellness journeys, with fertility journeys, is like, check your sources. Like, like we could be so consumed, especially like late night feeds. You could be scrolling. Like I remember like 3 a.m. I'm feeding and I'm just like scrolling on my phone. Suddenly he's going to get cancer because I'm scrolling on my phone because of the radiation. Then he's doing this. And I just think you have to take everything with a pinch of salt and protect yourself. Remember that, like, I like to think of social media as everyone's different shop. So I would come to your shop, if you like, Gabby. I would come to your Instagram, and that's your shop. Do I have to buy something in your shop? I could walk into JD Sports. Yeah, that is still going, isn't it? I could walk into JD and be like, do you know what? This isn't my shop. That's cool. I'm going to leave. I could walk into Lululemon and be like, my kind of shop. And I like to think like that would be my advice for anyone on social media. Treat it like you're going into someone else's shop. Not every single shop is right for you, but it is right for them. And they're just doing the best they can. There are some accounts out there that are just trying to make people sad, and there are trolls out there, but majority of people on social media are just sharing because they want to share. And I feel like, they have a right to share their stuff, but it's down to me and my responsibility to decide whether I want to take part in that shop and, not get consumed by everything in everyone's shop.
Have you found that people I'm going offline now, like that they feel like especially I think when it's family, they feel like they've got a right to tell you how they did it, or you should be doing it this way. Did you come into any kind of issues in that respect? I'm thinking about certain family members that I know that seem to be very judgy when it comes to like observing how others parent.
Yeah, not so much like the parenting side of things, but for me, my parents were all formula, like they all formula fed. So they were all encouraged to formula feed. That was like the way of the world. So my stepmom formula fed my brother and sister, and my mum formula fed me and my brother. So when I chose to breastfeed, which they say breast is best, and the hospital and the midwife encouraged that of you too, I was then faced with other questions like, when are you going to bring in formula? Or like, how long are you going to do this for? But again, you just have to remember, look, like everyone's only doing it based off their perception of their own reality, right? Like my mum and my stepmom didn't want me to struggle. If I was struggling with breastfeed, there was a solution there. Like every single time, especially family, I like to think that they're always trying to do it to support you, especially my family, and my friends. I felt like there was never, I don't feel like they were projecting anything on me. They were doing it just because they wanted me to care. But again, it was up to me whether I took that information. But yeah, I think like, why is it with parenthood and parenting that everyone's got an opinion on it?
I know. It does seem that way for sure. Just as we're kind of wrapping things up, Mother's Day is coming up. It's your first as a new mum. So I'd like to take this opportunity to just give the floor to you, Chlo, to speak to any new mums right now that might be feeling exhausted, lonely, down. What would you say to them?
Oh, it makes me feel a bit emotional thinking about it. Like it gets better, but you can't mum if you're not you. Like, don't forget about you. Nail your basics, whether that is, making sure you're eating enough, maybe, just making sure you shower, clean your teeth that day. Do you know what I mean? There's so many. We get pushed to the very bottom of the pile, but you'll get stamped on if you stay at the bottom of the pile, and you'll keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think you will be a better mum if you can at least just carve out something in your day, whether that's, take the baby for a walk and just do some deep breaths, look around you, look at the flowers, like get yourself a coffee, do something where it doesn't have to be huge, but just intentionally tell yourself, I'm doing this for me now. Because I think if you can carve something out for you, you will 100% be a better mum. Otherwise, the cave gets darker.
Are there any resources that spring to mind that you would signpost people to?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say your favorite podcasts. The Happier Life Project, like the mental health podcasts, books, Let Them by Mel Robbins. I'm quite woo-woo. I'm quite spiritual. So like any meditations on YouTube, Law of Attraction, Gabby Bernstein, for me, they provided hope. Anything that you love, I think, like helps provide hope. But I don't know.
Because what you're saying is consuming content that's going to help you, which ultimately is going to help you with your motherhood journey. But it's not like saying, listen to this baby podcast, or parenting podcast or whatever. You're saying listen to this pod or Mel Robbins or Gabby Bernstein,
Because I think every baby's different, like everyone's journey in motherhood's different. So like, I've got one of my really good friends now that she's, I think little boy's maybe like 6 weeks old. Like her 6-week journey has been totally different to mine.
Yeah.
So like the only advice I really have is, right, find something for you. Like pick something, because you will be a better mum if you look after you too.
Yeah, great advice there, Chlo. Thank you so much. What's your biggest lesson in this journey of motherhood so far, if you could pick one takeaway? That
embracing being a mum isn't a bad thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I had like perceptions of motherhood as being like old, boring, like I touched on, like you lose your life, you lose your body, you lose this, you lose that. And actually, that's up to you.
I pulled up your answers to the Happier Life Project's last 5 in 5. And I'm wondering if I can ask you them real quick, because I'm so curious to see whether, now that you're a mum, if your answers are the same now as they were back then. Do you have like 2 minutes to do that?
Yeah, go on, let's do it.
Okay. When and where are you at your happiest?
I actually have no idea what I said previously. Do you know what I would say? When I'm fully present with Tom and Frankie and my phone's away.
What you said last time was the gym, my CrossFit box is literally full of my best friends.
How times have changed.
Yes. What's your favorite thing to do that nourishes your mental health?
CrossFit.
For this one, you said create content.
Oh, nice.
So you're still there. The most important one thing that needs to change to make the world a happier place?
I think education around female bodies and the hormones and the roles of it. We need to educate and understand our bodies more.
Pretty much said the same thing last time.
We still got work to do, gang.
Exactly. What piece of advice do you now know that you wished somebody would have told you earlier that would have made you a happier person?
The power of your hormones in every stage of your life. Nail the basics. Understand your cycle.
Last time you said that you need to eat way more than you think you do.
That is part of nailing the basics.
Yeah, a solid answer. Okay, final question will be slightly different. What is a simple, actionable first step that new mums can take to support their mental and emotional well-being as they navigate the challenges of motherhood and work towards building a happier life?
Do not forget you. Carve out something, even if it is just 2 minutes, 30 seconds, intentionally for you, because the more you forget about yourself, the more you're going to struggle. Whereas even if you could just like grab something little just for you, top up your cup, and then you'll have so much more to pour out to everyone else.
Amazing stuff. Thank you so much, Chlo. Super appreciate it. Do you want to run through links real quick to find you on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm just at Chlo Hodgkinson. Gabby, I'm actually nervous about talking about this coming out. I've never spoken this deeply about it.
Well, thank you for being so open and honest.
Thank you so much. Speak to you later.
Hello, it's Gabby back. Big thanks again to you, Chlo Hodgkinson. And big thanks to you, my friend, for listening to this episode of the Happier Life Project. Now, if you are suffering with your mental health, there is a crisis button on the My Possible Self app, which will signpost you to the correct information for immediate expert advice. Those of you who are listening on one of the podcast platforms, the My Possible Self app is completely free to download, so you don't need to worry about it costing you anything. If you are in crisis or you think you may have an emergency, please do call your doctor or the emergency services immediately. The views expressed in this podcast are solely those of the interviewer, which is me, and the interviewees. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as a substitute for professional or medical advice. Our partners at the Priory Healthcare are not involved in the production or content of this podcast. Please do subscribe and leave a review if you found this episode helpful and you're listening on one of the big podcast platforms. And to find and follow us on social media, we are most active on Instagram, and you can find us at My Possible Self, and I've been at Radio Gabby. Do take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.